how do we find, number two, how do we find, state, it says, find, state, state three fractions that are between a fifth and a fourth? That's a little tricky. How do we find some fractions between a fifth and a fourth? Are there fractions between a fifth and a fourth? Any ideas? This one's a little more tricky, isn't it? I think you guys remember most of the stuff, but this one's a little more tricky. Well, let me give you a game plan. So what you can do, bring it down here. We've got 1/5, 1/4. So first, there's a lot of ways to do this. This isn't the only way. Let me just give you a suggestion. Step one. Multiply by the other denominator, top and bottom. Multiply by the other. So we'll take this guy and we'll multiply by 4, right? The 4 goes there and the 5 goes there. Basically kind of, share the other denominator. So multiply top and bottom of this one by 5. So that's step number 1. And what does that give us? 4/20 and 5. So that makes common denominator, doesn't it? When you multiply by the other denominator, you share denominators, in other words, that makes the two fractions now have a common denominator. Now they're both 20ths, aren't they? So now at this point, we need to find, again, 3 fractions between 4/20 and 5/20. How are we going to do it, right? It doesn't look like there's anything. After 4/20, the very next fraction is 5/20, isn't it? Well, actually, there's infinite fractions in between those, really. And you just have to open up a gap between them. What am I talking about? Well, if you want, what do we need? We need 3 fractions in between. So now, multiply top and bottom of both by a number 4 or bigger. Why 4 or bigger? Because that'll separate them. That'll open up a gap between them of 4, which means you can stick 3 fractions in between. You'll see. So let's multiply top and bottom by 4, top and bottom by 4. Remember, you can always multiply the top and the bottom of a fraction. You're not changing it. So then what will that give me? That'll give us, let me draw a line there for that. Okay, so that's step 2. So what that gives us is 16/20. Right? Let me change my color here. Keep going with the red there, be better. That gives us 16/20 and, oh no, 16/80. What am I doing? 16/80, 16/80 and 20/80. Right? Multiplying top and bottom. And now, do you see we have 3 fractions in between? Right? What's in between these guys? 17/80, 18/80, and 19/80. In between 16 and 20 is 17, 18, and 19/80. There's our answer. So it's 17/80, 18/80, 19/80. Yeah, and you don't need to reduce those, by the way. You can just leave this one. See, this one's reducible, but I'm pretty sure. I'm not, you tell me if I'm mistaken as you do your homework, but I think I'm 99% sure it'll let you put it in just like that. Don't need to bother with reducing. So we found 3 fractions that are in between our original 1/5 and 1/4. You see, multiplying by 4 or bigger separated these guys by 4, didn't it? See, before 4 and 5 were only separated by 1, but now 16 and 20 are separated by 4. That allowed 3 fractions in between. You see how that worked? Is that making sense, how we find 3 fractions in between? By the way, I want you to see that we haven't changed anything. Do you see that? If I was to take this 20/80ths here, right, and divide the top and the bottom by 20, it would go right back to 1/4. It's the same as 1/4, isn't it? And if I was to divide this guy, top and bottom, by what? 16. It would go right back to 1/5. It's the same as 1/5. So we just changed those 2 fractions, the original 1/5 and 1/4, to 80ths, so that we could have C and state 3 fractions in between them. Is that good? And we didn't have to multiply by 4. We could have multiplied by 5 or 6 or 7 or 8. See, it's 4 or bigger. When you multiply by 4, you make the jump between them 4, right? From 16 to 20 is 4. If you because I multiplied by 4. If you multiply by 5, it would be even bigger, 6, 7, 8, and then you would have lots of fractions in between. So, and they'll work too. This problem is well programmed. It knows, however you do it, it knows the right answers, whether the fractions are in between or not. So you can multiply by all kinds of, 4 or bigger. Any number 4 or bigger will separate them by 4. So, and then you can find 3 fractions in between. So step 1 is to multiply by the other denominator to make common denominator. And then once you have that, multiply top and bottom by any number 4 or bigger. That'll separate them by 4, and you'll have 3 fractions in between. Questions I can answer?